Hi, welcome to the Protected by Purpose podcast. This is your host, Dorinda Walker. I have the pleasure today of having Shavar Jeffries, Esquire, in the building. Welcome, Shavar.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
I'm glad to have you.
I'm happy to be here.
So Shavar and I first met at a gala for a domestic violence nonprofit called Sophia. And then we both did some work to educate teens on teen dating violence. So tell me why you're so passionate about educating people about domestic violence.
Well, for me, it's very personal. I lost my mom to domestic violence when I was 10, and it was horrible. It was horrible for me on so many different levels because my mom, she had me when she was 18. And the first 7-8 years of my life, I spent most of that time with different relatives because she was getting on her feet. I spent time with my aunt, my grandmother, my grandfather, a little bit of time with my father. He really wasn't around much. But my mom, she moved from Newark to California when I was around 8. And, maybe 6 or 7. I went to go live with her in California when I was around 8. Mm-hmm. And very excited, to kind of begin the rest of my life with my mom because I was, be with her in summers and different holidays. But we had a broken lock, and it's amazing how little things can affect the whole course of your life. But we had a broken lock. My mom found a locksmith. That's back in the days of Yellow Pages. Y'all young people don't know nothing about the Yellow Pages, but that's what we had back then. And the locksmith who came to fix the lock, and my mom, they, hit it off, got into a relationship. Not too long after that, they would get married. My mom would be pregnant with my little sister. And around that time, he started becoming abusive. And I had never seen any of that. I'd never seen that in my household. My grandfather, the men in my family would never think about putting their hands on anybody, let alone a woman. And it would just get worse and worse. My mom would get restraining orders. He would get bailed out. He'd come back more upset, bring in more violence. I remember this one incident where, he got bailed out. He came to the house. He kicked the door down, dragged my mom out. I was around 9 years old at the time. Wow. And after that incident, then we left because, she kept, following these charges, but he would get bailed out. And he kept coming back to where we lived. And so, we were basically on the run. And so we spent some time in the shelter. We spent time on the couches of friends of my mom. And a few weeks after that, on November 25th, 1985, she went to work. I still remember very vividly, some of the last words she said to me was, we're going to go see Rocky IV, which was coming out that Wednesday. I was a big Rocky fan. That's going to kind of be a time to escape from all of this. And Rocky IV was coming out that, like I said, that Wednesday. This was a Monday. And she went to work, and I wouldn't see her again. Because he was waiting for her. He didn't know where we lived. He didn't know where we were, but he knew where my mom worked. And so he waited for her at her job, and he followed her into her job, and he shot her and killed her in the workplace. And so it was horrible. Whatever issues he had, he stole my mom from me and my little sister and my grandmother's daughter, my grandfather's daughter, and my aunt's sister, and just the force she was in the world. She was an amazing person, so he robbed the world of her. For whatever insecurities or ridiculous issues that were really nothing, but he couldn't manage, and whatever toxic masculinity may have been inside of him, whatever disrespect of women that may have been inside of him. So that was horrible. And so I've dedicated a large amount of my professional career to doing everything I can to deal with this issue. I'm a lawyer, so I've done many cases around violence against women, many cases around domestic violence. I've done nonprofit work. I've spoken to men who have put their hands on women. I've had, I'm 44 now and only got one good knee. I've had men speak with hands to men, who use their hands to women. So anything I can do, I'm very passionate. And we obviously know it happens all the time. It's despicable. It's disgusting to me. There is no man. If you're not a man, if you're putting your hands on women, you're pathetic. You want to use your hands, find somebody your size. Better yet, don't use your hands. Let's learn conflict resolution. Let's learn men can figure out ways to resolve differences without using their hands or using violence. So anyway, that's what brought me into this work.
In writing my book, me and my mom were victims of domestic violence. And reflecting on that situation, I came to realize that he was so codependent on my mother, it consumed his identity. Like he had to control her in order for him to feel like a man. You and I have something in common with the date November 25th. It's the date my mother was born and the date your mother passed on.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I lost my mother in 2013 to cancer, but my mother died a heroin addict. She was able to leave her abuser. The last incident, he tried to set her on fire.
Oh my God.
And he went to her place of work, threw gasoline on her, and luckily the co-workers grabbed him before he was able to light a match.
Oh my God.
And he went to jail. I don't know what happened to him after that. And to my knowledge, my mother had never seen him again.
Wow.
Yeah. So tell me about 18-year-old Shavar. What was his dreams, aspirations, and how did you go on the journey to become a lawyer?
18. I feel so blessed in so many different ways. 18, I was a freshman year in college, and how I even got there, because I was the first in my family to go to college. So after I lost my mom, came back to Newark and went to live with my grandma, and this was my mom's daughter. And I would realize when I got older and can understand more, I didn't understand why she was so cold. She was so loving. I'll be very clear. My grandma's amazing. She passed in 2013 also. She stepped in. I was 10. My sister was 6 months old. But for my grandmother, we probably been in foster care somewhere. She was amazing. She worked her butt off to provide for us. It was a safe environment. We had what we needed. But also, she didn't necessarily have the emotional connection. And as a father now of 2 kids, I can imagine losing my daughter in any way. And we didn't know about therapy and counseling, so we didn't have the tools to deal with that. But what she did do, she put me in the Boys and Girls Club in Newark, first on Hawthorne Avenue back then, and then on Avon. And in 8th grade, a philanthropist created a scholarship to send about 10, 15 kids in Newark. Ray Chambers, who's an amazing booster for Newark, an amazing person, he created a scholarship for about 10, 15 kids in Newark to go to college prep high school. And because I was just in the Boys and Girls Club playing, I received that. And that just changed everything for me. We always worked hard in school, but now I didn't know about college, but when I went to Seton Prep, it kind of prepared me for that. So coming out of high school and then going into college, and I got scholarship to go to college. We didn't have money for college, any of that. I felt God had blessed me to be of service to the community that gave me so much. Newark gave me everything. And so I was always passionate that I wanted to use these blessings to do something, to deal with issues of violence against women, to deal with the fact that so many kids in the city of Newark don't have access to the schools that they should have, to deal with all the other ways in which there's inequity in our city, whether it's in terms of job opportunity, access to health care, environmental racism, mass incarceration. So kind of 18 at that point, I was really driven, right, to say that this, and I can talk about all kinds of other blessings, people, other scholarships I got, people sending me money, people sending me food, people sending me towels, getting to college and realizing I can't just go to medicine cabinet and see toothpaste, people sending toothpaste, Ron G mixtapes, Def Comedy Jam mixtapes. And so I always felt, this community put me on their back. And they damn sure not put me on their back for me to just do my thing and not look back. And so even then, I was driven. I want to cultivate everything God has given me and be of service back home.
What would you say to young people who may be going through a domestic violence situation or some situation where they feel hopeless? I look at you as a role model because by all accounts, society would have marginalized you and counted you out, but you still were able to turn your trials into tribulations. So what would you say to young men who may be listening?
I would say to young men who deal with domestic violence situations, one is, work with your mom to find the resources to deal with the situation, that you're not alone, that there's so many of us, Dorinda, myself, and so many others who will do what we can to support you. There's a lot of resources out there, whether it's Sophia, whether it's Essex County Family Justice Center. There's a lot of resources out there to provide support for that situation. I would say to the young men in the situation that also understand that is not what a man does, because we also know that there's a cycle that oftentimes when young people see this, they'll repeat that cycle, and that's not what a man does. And so they need to understand that that is dysfunctional behavior, and that's totally unacceptable behavior, so they don't internalize that. And then I would just encourage them to continue to move forward. For a young person, continue to be the best person you can be. Continue to, do the best you can in school. But most importantly, find a support mechanism to help you deal with that, and access therapy. I just think that's critical. It took me until I was in my 40s to begin to access therapy. I mean, I was just used to doing, right? So it was always, let's do the next thing and not process what has happened, and that all that stuff still with me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just now beginning to unpack the effects of all of this stuff. So I'd also encourage, access that support, deal with the situation, figure out the best way to get out of the situation, but also access the therapy while you're going through it, because this is a traumatic situation and you're being traumatized in that situation, even if you don't know it. And if you don't get the therapy, you're gonna carry that with you throughout your life, and there's no telling how that'll manifest itself.
Yeah, and writing a book, I've toured the country, and the impetus behind me really wanting to, go out on my own and do more around this service was the realization that so many people have similar stories, but they're holding on to the shame, or they're keeping it a secret. And so just by me sharing my story, it gave them permission to let it out.
Yes.
I think it's really important that we start to heal from these things and let go of the shame. How important is mentorship in this process? Because we don't see a lot of men, as advocates. So I applaud you for the work that you're doing. How important is it for men not only to be advocates, but mentors to young people so that they can help, hopefully, prevent these situations?
I think that's critical, because I think a lot of men have a very warped sense of manhood. One, because we don't have as many men showing them what a real man is in the first place. We have so many men who are working their butts off and who are amazing. So I'm going to start with that, because I do believe the majority, particularly black men, are handling their business. But then we do have too many who aren't there the way they need to be for their children. And then also, I think we, in our culture, we don't honor and love and respect our women the way we should. And so I think it's critical for men to have mentors who are clear about how a man conducts himself, about the words that come out of your mouth, reflect your character, reflect your spirit, and on every level. Everything from, frankly, even some of the music. I have my son who's 14, he was listening to, and I love hip hop. I grew up on Nas, I grew up on Rakim, and, Jay-Z, stuff like that. But we're not even, but I'm clear to him there's some stuff about, we call women to be, and the whole, I'm like, no, that's not how we gonna roll, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna reject that, because all that stuff seeps into the culture, and then it can seem as acceptable to cuss women out. It is acceptable to put your hands on women, disrespect, dishonor. So I think it's critical to have mentors to be clear about how a man conducts himself on all phases. And I think men have to hold other men accountable anytime they're being disrespectful, dishonorable to women. Not only physical, but emotional as well. It shouldn't be women who are primary. The man should be the first one to say, nah, bro, we're not doing that. That's not how we do.
Yeah.
I don't know who taught you that. I don't know where you learned that. That's not us, right? That's not what a man does. You're embarrassing yourself. You're disrespecting what it means to be a man. You're disrespecting our community. So I think it's critical. We need more. We have a group of guys. We work hard to push men to do things the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to grow that, because it's definitely not as many as we should have.
And women have an obligation in this process as well. When I think about the Love and Hip Hop series being like the most highly rated, TV shows for African Americans, Housewives of Atlanta, and it portrays women in a negative light. And I always tell my daughter, I said, when you look at my circle of friends, you don't see that. Mm-hmm. So that's not reality, mm-hmm. right? That's people acting to get a paycheck for TV. Mm-hmm. But as women, we have to, have standards and expectations on how we're treated.
That's right.
So we do play a role, and we need to work together as a community.
That's right.
I was just reading a research article that shook me to my core that Georgetown University did, It's called Black Girls Gone Lost, the adultification of Black girls. And it talked about how it was actually a research study that Georgetown did where they interviewed people of all different races. And the findings were that society views Black girls as having being more susceptible to adult issues, growing up faster, being sexualized earlier. So it leads to those sexploitation situations like with R. Kelly and things like that. And then I've been reading some of the comments, and some of the commentary is around the dysfunction really comes from the dismantling of Black families. So I'd love to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think there's so much involved there. I think, Blackness has been stigmatized to be, animalistic. It's been, we're not as smart, we're not as brilliant, we're not as beautiful. And part of that, I think, is that even our young people, both boys and girls, right? Because once you have this stigma in this animalistic sort of way, so even when you're a baby, you're not a baby, right? Babies are tender, sweet, are lovable. And when the ways in which race is stigmatized, it makes it so that our young people are scary already. So our Black boys, you could be Trayvon, you could be a baby with a hoodie, but you're a threat. You could be Tamir Rice, 13, with a water gun. You're not seen as a baby with a water gun. You're seen as a threat. And so we see that. And then with girls, with our Black girls, you may not get the threat of violence, but you're sexualized in these sort of ways. So even though you're a baby, you're more than that. You're different than that. I mean, we saw that back in the slave days where our young girls, as it is still today, sadly, being raped and brutalized and assaulted at young ages. So I mean, that's definitely a big piece of it. And I do think the breakdown of the Black family definitely makes it worse and exacerbates that. We have too many babies having babies.
Yeah.
Like I said, my mom was 18, so I've been through that. And I remember when I was 18, I shouldn't really be watching somebody's dog for a week at 18, right? I mean, I wasn't equipped emotionally, financially, mentally. You're just not ready. That's the bottom line. I mean, we can pretend now we all do what we have to do, as my mom did, and my family did. But if we actually, and there's actually some studies that talk about that you can actually break the cycle of poverty if you get a high school diploma, and then get married and obviously have a child. And that's obviously a very traditional model, and I'm not here to say there's a lot of different ways we can do it, but we know this: if we wait to have our children, at least until we're emotionally and financially ready, and ideally in a committed relationship, so you can actually team up to raise that child, it's better off for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I do think as a community and as a culture, we have to encourage that, right? We get it at young ages. Many of us have engaged in sexual activity, so it's not anything judgmental at all. We're all human beings trying to do the best we can, but at the same time, there's certain things we can take in terms of, contraceptive, resources, so that we can actually plan our parenthood, so that when we become a parent, we're better equipped for it. Because the Black family, given the ways in which race plays out, sexism plays out, our Black girls and women deal with the intersection of both race and sexism, so they have the double challenge there. This society really doesn't want to see us win on so many different levels. The history in this country teaches us that. The family has to be the strongest kind of bulwark to protect us for that. So when you don't have the family protecting you, we're sending our babies into this challenging environment, which can be dog eat dog, and every man, every woman for themselves. The family has to be your base for that. And when we don't have that strong base, it's then not surprising that the way that the challenges we already have from white supremacy are made even worse, because we don't have that strong family and community foundation that we could have. We still have so many amazing families, regardless of the arrangement.
Yeah.
I think about my grandmother. She's one of the most amazing people I know. My mom, she's one of the most amazing people I know. But on the other hand, I know if they would have had more help and been more of a team, everybody would have been better off.
Yeah. So I just finished watching Ava DuVernay's movie on the Central Park 5. I don't know if you saw the movie, but I'm a big proponent of rehabilitation for people who are addicted to opioids, right? But what's burning me up is when our communities were flooded with heroin and with crack, there was no rehabilitation for us. It was jail.
That's right.
And that really disseminated the black family. I feel like we were coming over that hump from the crack epidemic in the 80s. What would you say to young people to keep them out of the system? Because when you read the statistics, black girls get arrested 6 times more than their white female counterparts. And the direct correlation that systemic racism and education has on the wealth disparity. So what would you say to young people and parents to try to help their children from not becoming part of that process?
Yeah, I'd say 2 things. One is, as a community as a whole, we got to continue to organize politically to challenge this system to treat our community more fairly, more equitably. So I love what people like Ryan Hager and Institute for Social Justice are doing to close youth prisons in the state of New Jersey. We have a governor who wants to build more youth prisons, and actually wants to build another one in Newark. When they build them, they don't put them out in the suburbs, they put them in the cities because it's clear who they want to put in them. Yeah. And the Institute has a great stat where I think in the entire state of New Jersey, I think there's literally 7 white kids in youth prisons in the state of New Jersey, and exponentially more times that of African American Hispanic. A white kid makes a mistake, you get what they call a jailhouse adjustment, basically taken to the precinct, the cop, you better not get here, come here again, let's connect them with some services in the community, whether it's addiction services, mental health services, other transitional services, and you move from there. Too often our kids were put into the criminal punishment and imprisonment system because they don't view us as human in the same sort of way. So the part of how we have to deal with that, my judgment, we have to be very organized as a community. And we have to vote. And we have to vote for the people who are going to advance our interests. We don't vote at the numbers we need to, so that makes it even worse. So that means the people in power tend, disproportionately are folks who don't want to treat us in an equitable manner. So I think collective action, collective organizing, collective political advocacy is absolutely critical, so we can at least mitigate. I mean, I never expect this country to treat us in a fully equitable way. But if we're organized politically and are very strategic, we can mitigate that and make it not as bad as it's been. So I think that piece is absolutely critical. Then I think the other piece is recognizing that we can't make the same mistakes other folk can make, and that's totally unfair, and that's why we have to push against that. But I grew up with my grandmother and grandfather all the time. We gotta be twice as good as these people. Yeah. That's just, it shouldn't be that way. That's what it's gonna be. We're not gonna get the same breaks. And so I think making sure that we create our own institutions to support our own community, to inculcate those values, are very critical as well. I mean, it starts with the family, and we have so many amazing families, but continuing to build upon that, investing our resources in institutions that support us and are going to treat us fairly, whether it's ones we build and create or allies do. I think that is critical as well. So I think we got to have the external strategy of pushing this system. And the work of people like Ava, not only with When They See Us, her prior documentary 13 was amazing in terms of mass incarceration. So we have to push against that system, but then we got to make sure internally we have the institutions to support ourselves, so that, frankly, we're not as dependent on what others have made available, because oftentimes those other resources aren't in our best interest.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom for black folks. We are the most resilient people on the planet. We practically helped to create the American culture. So I do want to celebrate us and everything that we have contributed to not only American culture, but global culture.
Absolutely.
Jay-Z just made the billionaires list. I'm like, hip-hop is a business, right?
Absolutely.
So I want to switch gears and talk about some of the work you're doing around advocating for education. So tell us about that work and why it's important to you.
Well, education to me is critical. And education has been everything for me. I mean, it's what really changed my life. And I also saw that there was great educational inequity. So when I was going to Seton Hall Prep, and I was taking the 39 and the 24 up to West Orange to the prep, when I came back home every night, I saw how the kids I grew up with didn't believe that they could get to the next level. So I would come home talking about, hey, we're gonna go to college, right? In college, we can go to college and we can, have more skills, and we can we can get better jobs, we can build businesses, we can have more economic security, and we can serve our community in a different type of way. And the cats I was growing up with, I was like, no, we don't know anybody going to college. How are we going to do that? We don't know how to do that. Because then it just came clear to me that our schools, as good as so many of them were, weren't as good as they needed to be to serve our young people. So I've been very passionate about that. So as a civil rights attorney, we've done everything from school funding litigation to sue the state to put more money in our schools in New Jersey through the Advocacy in our schools in the cities. We've done work around accountability to hold the system accountable to actually produce better results for kids. Done a lot of work there. Done work around tracking. We'll see. And it's really because we are great, so amazing too, to be clear. I mean, we're magical. I mean, black people are amazing. And that can be a threat to other people. But I've done work around tracking where we would see African American, Hispanic kids tracked to remedial classes, white kids tracked to the honors and advanced placement class. I did a case like that in South Orange. Then also want to build institutions. And so I was the board chair, the founding board chair of the largest public charter school in the state of New Jersey, KIT, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. We have schools in Newark and in Camden. I then decided I wanted to impact the district more, so I actually ran for the school board in Newark. So I was on the school board for 3 years. And we did a lot of great work, I'm very proud of, in terms of extended learning time and new school models in the Newark district. And so that I think educational opportunities is at the heart, particularly now, because so many of the jobs now are requiring a higher skill level.
Yeah.
We have automation coming, where a lot of the entry-level retail jobs that in decades past were able to make folks to get into the middle class and take care of their families. A lot of those are being automated, or they're being shipped overseas, where people can pay, where companies can pay an even lower wage. Mm-hmm. And so it's even more important that we make sure our folks have the skills so that they can get the jobs that exist in the labor market so they can take care of their families. And that's connected to educational opportunity. And we, even today in the city of Newark, we only have about 15% of our young people obtaining a credential past high school. And that's not going to be, that means we have too many of our folks who aren't really going to be competitive in the labor market. So I'm really passionate about making sure we improve our schools. We also work in the higher education space to make sure that after high school, whether it's college or it's vocational programs or career programs, that we're connecting not only young people but adults with the retraining they need so that they can get decent jobs in the economy. And so I just think that's absolutely critical for our community.
I did a video on systemic racism and the wealth disparity. And occupational segregation was a big one, particularly, for blacks and Hispanics, because we're not going into STEM-related fields. So I'm a big proponent of that, and educating not only the children but the parents. I think the household has to work together to make sure that the kids are set up for success.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So for people who want to get more active in the educational system in their communities, what are some tips that you would give them so they can have a voice and have a say on the different policies and things that are happening in their local communities?
Yeah, and that's critical because the voice of parents and communities can really shift things in terms of what's happening with individual schools and in school systems. So the first thing is if you're a parent or you're just someone who loves a child, see what's going on at that school. Engage with the principal, engage with the administrators at that school. Get a sense of what the curriculum is. Get a sense of what the data shows. Because that's critical. I mean, often it's great to get people's opinions about what's happening in the school and what the extent to which education is at a high level, but the data speaks for itself. Get the data around the proficiency rates, get the data around the extent to which kids are graduating from high school on time and going to whether it's college or other quality post-secondary options. So that's very important. And then to the extent that things are going on that you don't like, raise your voice. Go to the school board meeting. Let it be known what it is that you have concerns about. I mean, obviously, first try to work it out with the administrators and see if we get on the same page. If you can't, go to the school board meeting. Raise your voice. Go to the superintendent. Raise your voice. Vote. I mean, the voting is critical. And, the school board elections in the state of New Jersey, like in most parts of the country, are the lowest turnout elections. Maybe some of the most important elections at the lowest turnout. Find out who's running. Question people. Then the people who have the kind of vision you think can really be good for kids and for young people, support them. If you don't like who's running, run yourself. Right? We need new people to get involved too. And oftentimes in these elections, we have the same people running again and again, and you don't get fresh ideas. And that's not going to happen until regular people get involved and say we're going to change it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think all of that is critical. A big reason I'm very much involved in the whole parent choice space is I want parents to have more options. Traditionally in our cities, what would happen is that the system would look at your address and assign a school based upon the neighborhood you lived in. That might not be inherently problematic if the school is working at a high level, but it's also the absence of freedom because there's no choice. You just got to take what you're given. And so I do a lot of work around expanding the options so that families and parents can make a decision and inform of, if they then access the information, an informed decision about what school will best serve their child. And it places pressure on everybody. You're not guaranteed anybody's baby. So don't just think you're going to open the door and whoever's the neighbor is going to come in.
Yeah.
They're not coming through that door unless you can show parents and families you're going to provide a quality service that'll impact that child's life. And if they're not, they're going somewhere else, and they should go somewhere else, right? And so I think all of that is critical, but it can't happen if parents don't raise their voice, don't get involved, vote. If you're somebody you really like, and is that somebody who's run for office myself, being just a regular person who wants to run and make a difference, that is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Which means that if parents and families like what that person is talking about, you really have to get out there to support the person, because supporting them is not supporting them, it's supporting yourself, because you want them to get in there and do the things that you think are best for your community.
All right, that was good advice. Where do you see Shavar 20 years from now?
Wow. I'll be 64 then. Hopefully about 64, I'm ready to, I should be retiring and looking at my kids and the next generation to take us to a whole different level. I hope by then that I've been able to use what God has given me in an even more impactful way. 'Cause I do just really feel a call and a responsibility to use all this, because He's given me so much. I mean, it's bananas where I came from, the way I am now, and I know that's because of Him. So I really want to. By then, I pray I can, that I can look to Him and know I did well with what He gave me, and that we used it in the most impactful way to create the most change. But I hope by then, mid-60s, I hope by then, I'm planning to get to a beach, or maybe to East Africa where my wife's family is from, and give whatever wisdom I have or don't have, give that to the group coming after, and get out the way and let them take us to the next level.
Somehow I don't see you retiring.
I gotta retire at some point. I mean, mid-60s, I'm hoping I won't be there just more to give comfort and support. And because I do think, particularly in our community, sometimes too, we can, we don't oftentimes support the young people the way younger folks the way we need to, and pass the baton to them and provide wisdom and insight. So not officially retired, but saying, now it's time to come to the sideline and coach. We got to get some other players on the field who, can bring some new energy.
So your wife's from East Africa. Have you done your ancestry?
I haven't done that. I need to do that. I haven't done that. You did that?
I did mine. So I'm from part Cape Town, part I think Western European, Italian. But there was some surprises in there. Scandinavian.
Wow.
Where did it come from? So
I need to do that. I'd love to find out how to do that.
So my goal is to travel every place that I'm from.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
I love that.
My husband won't do it. He doesn't have an interest trying to get him to do it. All right. So three life lessons based on the Shavar Jeffries journey of life.
Wow. I'd say the first one is always remember your greatness. I think that's critical for everyone, especially Black folk, because the whole point of race was to stigmatize us as subhuman, that we weren't even human, not that we were just great. So I just think it's very important to always remember your greatness. Always remember how amazing that you are. Always remember remember that there's nothing you can't do. You can do everything. I'm a big basketball fan, and Draymond Green just said, who plays with the Warriors earlier this week, had an amazing quote that speaks to this. He said, if you don't already believe you're the best ever, you failed already. And I believe that.
Yeah.
I believe every person in this world has some specific and unique genius that's inherent to them that no one else has, and that if they walk in that greatness that they already have, that they can change the world. So I think that's critical. Remember that no matter what, You can do everything. You're amazing. You're brilliant. You're beautiful. You're genius. I would start with that. Then number two, connected to that, I think it's very important to surround yourself with people who believe in their greatness too. Because if your circle isn't one in which the people in that circle are connected to their greatness, you can be brought down to that. Because oftentimes people who don't really believe in themselves, even if it's subconscious, it's hard for them to support other people in achieving their unique, dreams and their greatness because they don't believe it's possible for themselves. And so I think that's absolutely critical. Then I think the third piece is, because you're great and amazing, you now have an obligation to cultivate that, right? So you have an obligation to whatever it is. If you want to create a business, if you want to serve your community in an impactful way, you want to build a school, you want to create a nonprofit to bring transformation. You have an obligation to cultivate that. So there's no substitute for the work in the gym, in the lab. There's no substitute. You want to create an amazing business, but you don't know what financial statements are. We got to get in that lab and we got to learn that. You want to create, an amazing school. We have to know that exquisitely. That means we have to read everything. We have to get training. We have to get support. So I think it's critical to then cultivate that genius. Put in the time. Put in the work, because the greatness that's inside people, I don't think can manifest itself if people don't cultivate it through the hard work and training and discipline that's required to do that.
I love that you said that, because when God puts that vision in your head, He's showing you what you're capable of. But you have to put in the work and know that you're worthy to fulfill the dream. And based on my experience, the dream is always much bigger than what I have ever imagined.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
So it was a pleasure having you.
Pleasure is mine.
Thank you for coming to the Protected by Purpose podcast. Sponsored by Newark Ironbound Film and Television Studios. Please be sure, if you're in the film and entertainment industry or have an interest in film and television, to check out the Newark International Film Festival that's coming here to town in September. So peace and blessings and good night.